What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. He's Anthony SanFilippo. It is a beautiful day at Citizens Bank Park. A little windy. It would have been, though, a great day for a playoff game. Instead, we're here for the season-ending press conference. But first, we got to get to our sponsor for this episode.
Of what?
Phillies Stoplight.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Phillies Stoplight, brought to you by Wapner Newman, Philadelphia's personal injury attorneys.
So obviously a ton of stuff to get to from today's press conferences, but both Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thomson. Not to minimize Rob Thomson, but Rob Thomson speaks every day throughout the course of the season multiple times. Dave Dombrowski speaks a few times a year, so when he does speak, obviously you listen as much as you can for every detail, because he's the one making these decisions ultimately. And the first decision made was they're going to bring back a lot of the same coaching staff, almost the entire same coaching staff. They are making a change in terms of what Mike Calitri's responsibility is going to be this season, though.
Yeah, so they're going to make a change for the bench coach, right? So Mike Calitri's not being fired. He's being put into a new role, and he's going to be the field coordinator, major league field coordinator. Phillies have never had that before. Several other teams in baseball have one. Most teams have a minor league field coordinator, but most teams don't have a major. What does a field coordinator do, Tim? The field coordinator is basically the guy that runs the team administratively, right?
Yeah.
And so basically it's the person who schedules the workouts, and we're going to do this at this time, and we're going to do this practice at this time, handles all of spring training, right? Still in on the strategy meetings and talks about things like that, but it's more of an administrative role. So Mike Calitri is going to be put into that role. It's something he was already doing anyway as the bench coach. And they want to go out and they're going to hire a new bench coach. And this new bench coach, according to Dave Dombrowski, would ideally be someone with managerial experience, which makes you wonder, is the thought that they want to bring someone in here who could potentially be Rob's replacement at some point?
Yeah, no, I know that thought's going to be out there. My opinion is, if you're bringing in somebody to be the replacement, you should just make the change and make that person the manager. So, not to say that you can't bring in somebody that ends up being the replacement. I don't like the coach in waiting thing, though. It was awkward when Ryan Sandberg was on Charlie Manuel's staff, because it was so obvious that's what it was, and you used all this capital waiting for him. He became the manager, and it did not go particularly well. So in this case, I think you're looking at, do they want to go with just a guy that's been a manager and can help build your staff get over the hump next year? Or is it, like you said, someone that can potentially succeed Rob? And it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other, but there's some guys out there. The one that came to my mind was Ron Washington, that was not brought back as the Angels manager, but was has experience managing there, managed two teams that appeared in the World Series in Texas, and was huge on those staffs in Atlanta. I don't think they've been able to replace him since. Now, he had quadruple bypass surgery, missed a lot of this past season. He is in his mid-70s, so he may just be done. But he wanted to come back as Angels manager. They didn't bring him back. He's an interesting person to me. Or do you go with like Rocco Baldelli, who got let go as manager of the Twins? I know people have talked about David Ross, like someone that has managerial experience and is also young enough that, in theory, even if Rob Thomson manages 5 more years, could eventually be the manager here.
Yeah, look, it's constant pursuit of this thing back here, right? You're trying to get that trophy. Phillies have only had 2 of them in 100 and whatever years. 100,
a lot.
Yeah, 100 and whatever years. But the point is that they want to try. I think that they want to try and go for something here, Tim, where they have somebody who has a different viewpoint than maybe what they have internally. So you're bringing in someone to kind of offer a different perspective, the minority report, as it were, right? I mean, in a sense, in that. Yeah, the Phillies have done things a certain way, and every time, and you go off of that groupthink mentality. If someone now is bringing you a different perspective, it maybe gives you pause and makes you think. Why I think this is different than what you said with the Ryan Sandberg, Charlie Manuel situation is that back then that team was at its end, right? It was done, and they just they wouldn't admit it yet that they were done and they needed to rebuild. And so I think that's what made it more awkward. I think when a team is still competitive and the Phillies still plan on being a playoff team and competing for the World Series next year, I don't necessarily think it makes it as awkward, unless they get off to a bad start. They're 7 games under 500 in June, and they're not looking like the team that they're supposed to be.
They don't extend Rob Thomson.
Right. Well, that's something that Dombrowski also said that they want to do. They want to give him an extra year, and I think he's confident they'll get there.
I think they will.
Yeah, they just didn't feel like it was a top priority.
What I would say in terms of that is giving the extension doesn't really mean anything. It can be a write-off if you decide after next year or even during next year to make a change. The Phillies picked up Pete Maccannon's option during the 2017 season for 2018 and didn't bring him back for 2018. The Giants just did the same thing with Bob Melvin. So it's more like you're giving the guy the ability not to be asked every day about his job status, essentially. And yeah, you can pick it up then ultimately and you play out that year if that's what you choose to do. But that's kind of, I guess, what the advantage of adding that would be. Now, in terms of the staff, I don't think anybody thought Caleb Cotham was going to go.
No.
There are a lot of people upset that Kevin Long will return as hitting coach. And I understand there's going to be a lot of people Xing out or whatever platform you're watching this off of, closing out. When I say that, I don't disagree with bringing Kevin Long back. If anything, I thought there was more of a case last year to make a change. A lot of the adjustments people wanted to make in terms of the Phillies chasing lefts, in terms of seeing some more from Stott and Marsh and that group you did in the second half of the season. I get that there's frustration. I think it's going to come down to more making changes to the players here as opposed to making a change of the hitting coach.
First of all, outside of even the manager in a lot of ways, but outside of the manager, when you're making changes on the coaching staff, it's cosmetic, right? It's not going to suddenly make these guys better hitters to bring in a different hitting coach. They are what they are. Secondly, as you suggested there a minute ago, there were multiple players who rebounded under Kevin Long's tutelage and the rest of the hitting coaches. Look at Trey Turner's season. Won the batting title. First Philly to win a batting title since 1958. Did anyone think he was going to do that the way he played in 23 or 24? Right? Kyle Schwarber had his career year, has credited Kevin Long with the changes that he's needed over the course of 5 years that he's been with him. And he's going to be runner-up for MVP in the National League. You mentioned Brandon Marsh had a great year after a terrible first month, made some changes, made some adjustments, and was really good. Bryson Stott, they made a change to the way he was holding his hands and holding the bat right around mid-July, and from mid-July on, he was a .294 hitter.
Yeah.
It's like there were a lot of changes that were made at the major league level with veteran players who've been around, and they were successful. So in that regard, yes, they didn't hit against a great Dodgers pitching staff in the playoffs. But is that the reason you get rid of Kevin Long? That doesn't make any sense to me either. I think he should be back.
I think it would have been a different conversation in mid-June than it is now. Because the Phillies lineup outside of Harper, Schwarber, Turner in mid-June was bad. A lot of it picked up in the second half, and some of that was getting Harrison Bader in there, just getting better personnel. But a lot of it was guys internally made improvements. So I know that there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with that. I believe it was the right decision. But it is going to come down to having a better lineup in my mind. And one of the guys that they need to be better next year, even though for most standards he was very good this year, for his standard, this was a relative down year for Bryce Harper. Didn't do much in the short postseason format that they played in. But Dave Dombrowski had some interesting thoughts today on Bryce Harper, on his 33rd birthday, mind you.
Yeah, I thought that was the most telling thing that Dombrowski said today. Because he basically, he served a speedball back at Harper and says, all right, now you hit it. And what it was that he said, Bryce is, normally you think of him as an elite player. He didn't have an elite season. Will he be elite again? Time will tell. And this is what Dave was saying. It wasn't saying like that. He wasn't saying it confidently that, it's just 1 year, he'll be fine next year. He says that sometimes guys at this age, don't let the bug bother you, Tim.
Yeah, too late.
Sometimes guys at this age get, this is when the decline starts. He compared Bryce, this is what I thought was interesting, to Freddie Freeman. Now,
caught a stray as he's preparing to play for maybe a second World Series in as many years.
Yeah, and Freeman is not having didn't have a bad year this year, at the same age as Bryce, he was 4th in the league in MVP voting. He
Had
was
60 doubles, 59 doubles that season.
and he was 3rd the following year at age 33. So, and now he's 36, and his numbers at 36 were better than Bryce's were this year at 32. So you look at it and say, okay, well, if he's comparing him to Freddie Freeman, if Bryce Harper can do what Freddie Freeman's done the last 3 years, the next 3 years, everything's going to be fine. And you're just going to look at 2025 and just write it off as one of those mid-years, right, for Harper.
Which happened over the course of a 13-year deal. Manny
Yeah.
Machado has not been a superstar every year of his deal. You go down the list of most guys that signed these Mookie Betts this year. There were some extenuating circumstances. He did not have his normal season either.
Right.
So that happens over the course. I just think they're more concerning when they happen at 32 as opposed to 28.
Well, of course, everybody's going to start to look at it and say, and look, I wrote this, and I'm saying it too. Is this a sign that this is where his career turns? Right? I called it the fulcrum of this 13-year contract. Is it possible that this is the fulcrum, and that the 6 years after it are not nearly as good as the 6 years before it? It wouldn't surprise if that's the case. That's just human nature. As you get older, you're not going to be as good a player as you were when you were younger. But I think it's probably a question of, is this happening a little bit sooner than maybe people thought?
Honestly, I remember saying at the beginning of this year, the first 7 years is your window, and the 7th year just ended. So that factors into a degree. I would say at the same time, I still think Bryce Harper is going to be a really good player. And the problem for me has not been whether he's capable of doing it. The problem has been him being able to stay on the field and kind of build any sort of momentum in terms of it's hard when you're in and out of the lineup. You have your back gets tweaked and you missed a few days. You had surgeries. You had the wrist thing, which, by the way, Dave Dombrowski said no issues heading into the offseason there, so that's a good sign. But the biggest issue, and Rod Thomson said, take his numbers and add 25 games to it, and it's a really good year. Well, you haven't been able to do that for pretty much his entire time here, other than his first season, and obviously you had the shortened season in 2020. But it's been kind of a weird tenure for Bryce Harper in terms of availability, because he's ended up playing like 160 games a lot of years because of the postseason, but you've had seasons where you play 110, 130, 120, like that may just be what he is, but I think that's partially to contribute. Like Freddie Freeman, through the ups and downs, has pretty much never really missed significant time in most years.
Yeah, and look, as much as we're sitting here and being speculative about it and raising those red flags, the one thing that I could say is Rob Thomson was the one guy who felt that Harper not having as great a season as he usually has would be the big motivator for him to come back next year. And even to quote Rob Thomson said, I think it'll motivate him to have the best season of his career. That's a bold statement, right?
Yeah.
Like to say that the best season of his career, he's a 2-time MVP.
And 2015 was like one of the greatest seasons in modern MLB history.
Right,
so.
It'd be tough to top that.
Yeah.
But you know what? Rob also said to me one time when we were talking about the goals that he had set for Trey Turner this year, that you shoot high.
Yeah.
Right? You shoot high and you try and you may not get there, but that's something that you want to do. So maybe shooting high here with Harper, saying, he's going to have the best year of his career. He's probably not going to have that, but if he has even 75% or 80% of the best year of his career, that's a lot better than what he got out of him in 2025.
Absolutely, and I think if he's a top 10 MVP finisher, you'll sign up for that.
Yeah.
1,000 times. And maybe he won't be as good as he was 2021 or what he did in the playoffs in 2022. That is the reality as a player ages. He wasn't as good this year and you won 96 games because you've become less reliant on him than you were when he first got here. Now, part of that is going to depend on, does Kyle Schwarber come back? Does JT Realmuto come back? If one or both of them don't, what do you replace them with? But the Phillies have done a good job the last few years of not being so reliant on Bryce Harper the way they were 2019 through 2021. So in that sense, that bodes well for the future. Now, one guy that I think we are both in agreement will not be back in the lineup next year is Nick Castellanos. And I asked Dave Dombrowski, does he believe that this relationship can continue for another year, given that you had moments this year where he was frustrated about his role, frustrated with Rod Thomson, and he mostly declined to go into it. He said, we'll see, and then also added, I'm paraphrasing, but added, but what you said is true. So there wasn't some denial, there wasn't some attempt to put the toothpaste back in the tube. They managed through some turbulence this year. I would be shocked if Nick Castellanos is back on the
Yeah,
Phillies next season.
I'm even at 100%. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to be.
I think they'll release him before he's back on the team next year.
Yeah, but they don't want to say that
Right.
now because they would like to try and trade him and save themselves a few dollars. And
That's what it'll be, though.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a few. He's owed $20 million. If you can get someone to take $4 million of that, you probably just take it.
Well, I think ultimately you settle for whatever you can get,
Yeah.
right? But I think that could you think someone would pay $9-10 million
No.
for Nick Castellanos?
No.
You don't think it would be that much?
According to Fangraphs, he was the worst qualified player in the league last year, and you can get rid of some of that by maybe having him DH. But he didn't hit lefties as well this year, or didn't hit righties, as well this year. And when you tried to move him here out of the outfield, he wasn't happy about it. So, no, I mean, I think this is a trade where you take any relief you can get, and it's not a trade where you're getting relief or you're eating money because you'll get no, you're getting a warm body back most likely, and you're just going to move forward and kind of hope it's addition by subtraction. Nick Castellanos had some really good moments. They managed it through this season. It is time, I think, for these two sides to go their separate ways.
Yeah, no, he's not going to be back next year. I'm pretty confident in that.
One guy I felt pretty confident going into today. I feel even more confident. Jose Alvarado has a $9 million option. If they decline it, it would be a $500,000 buyout. Dave Dombrowski didn't outright say they're picking it up today, and the more I've thought about it, Jose Alvarado in the next 2 weeks could have some injury where it changes their calculus, so they're not going to say today, yes, they're going to do it. But he later said, and Rod Thomson also said he's bullish on him going into next year, but Dave Dombrowski later said, essentially, he'd be surprised if he's not here.
Yeah, and I think that there is an alternative way of doing this. It doesn't have to be about picking up the option. Maybe you do still buy out the option, but then re-sign him at a lower number.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a realistic possibility.
I thought that at one point, but teams are so. Jordan Romano last year pitched 15 games, had a bad elbow, and got $8.5 million after getting non-tendered. I think if Jose Alvarado becomes a free agent, he's getting $9 million minimum, and there might even be a team that says we'll give you a second year or an option that has a high buyout, something like that. I don't. If you want Jose Alvarado back, I think you just pick up that option and move.
Yeah, but what if you, as part of the renegotiated deal, have that second year or third year, right? I'm saying, so it guarantees him that money.
There may be a part of him that feels like he owes the Phillies one, and frankly, he does.
Yes.
But that's not how you operate from a business sense usually. Like, there's very few because if Jose Alvarado comes out next year and is the best reliever in baseball, the Phillies aren't going to say, well, you pitched better than $9 million, so we'll throw in a few million here. So in this case, where Jose Alvarado did burn the Phillies this year, even if he feels like he owes the Phillies one, I think you're still going to go for whatever the most money is when push comes to shove.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I think, when you can talk about Alvarado and he'll be part of it. I'm pretty confident he'll be part of the bullpen next year. But I asked Dave about approaching the bullpen and looking at the bullpen this coming off season based off of the challenges that the bullpen had last year. Obviously the decisions that they made in last off season didn't pan out. Both Romano and Joe Ross didn't work in the bullpen. They had to they had to trade for Duran. They had to sign David Robertson, which was whatever, it was fine. But they really put themselves behind the eight ball to such an extent in the bullpen that come games 3 and 4 against the Dodgers, they were trying to get to Duran with only starters.
Yeah.
Right? And so I asked Dave if he would have a different, if it made him think about the bullpen differently going into this offseason. He basically told me no.
Yeah.
I mean, basically said having Duran changes everything going into it. So you already have your closer in place. You've already talked about Alvarado coming back. He mentions obviously Matt Strahm and Tanner Banks going to be there. They still believe in Orion Kerkering. I know that there's going to be some question marks about that because of what happened and how it ended. But they were saying that he's a tough kid and that he's got the right mindset, and they feel like they're going to give him enough support that they'll be able to bring him back and he'll be part of that bullpen again. And I know that they have he mentioned some younger guys that he has coming. He mentioned Max Lazar. I mean, I'm sure what that's worth. I do think that they like that kid Alex McFarland in the system. I think that he's going to be a potential guy. Who knows where Gage Wood is at some point next year. So maybe they may not go and add pieces to the bullpen next year. Maybe they feel like the needs are so great elsewhere that that's one that they'll just stick with what they have.
We'll see how the first half of the season goes. The thing is, if you made me guess, you're not going to have Ranger Suarez next year. So
Right.
you're not going to have that guy that you can slide. And maybe somebody else, maybe Luzardo can become that guy next year if you go into the playoffs with Wheeler healthy in his age 36 season, Nola healthy and pitching well. I mean, there's a lot of ifs there, like in terms of your starters. So I don't know that I bank on, at least as currently constituted, that you're going to have a guy in your rotation that immediately can shift into that role. I do think the first half of next season becomes about, do you, specifically against the Dodgers, but against any team, do you have enough guys that you trust to get the ball to Joe Andron? Because they obviously did not during this past postseason. They lost some trust as it went on in Strom and David Robertson. Orion Kerkering, I think, has a role, but at this stage, you've seen enough moments, not just this past postseason, where maybe he hasn't been up to the challenge in some of these big moments. So you need to have some legitimate guys for 7th, 8th inning. Maybe Jose Alvarado's part of that solution. I don't know, but to me that becomes a big takeaway. Now the final thing I want to talk about here, because we only have a minute, but I think coming away from today's press conference, I feel almost sure Justin Crawford will be in the opening day outfield.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it'll be a center and left, but it'll be one of those two. I think whether Andrew Painter's in the rotation to open the season or on May 1st, I think he's most likely here early next year. I know it's like a boy who cried wolf situation there, but I do think he'll be there. And Aiden Miller, I'll be interested to see what they do with him next spring training, because by all counts, he's done what he needs to stay at shortstop. But we were here a year ago with me asking Dave Dombrowski about Trey Turner's defense. Trey Turner answered the call and then some this year. I was surprised he wasn't a Gold Glove finalist. So at least for the next couple seasons, Trey Turner, in my mind, is not moving from shortstop. I think suggestions of moving him to the outfield are asinine when he's approaching his mid-30s and has had hamstring injuries in back-to-back seasons. I think that, I don't know where that, especially because he wasn't good in the outfield when he was like 10 years younger. That narrative has never made sense to me. In any event, I think Aiden Miller will be up potentially at some point next season, but it would probably have to be at second base or third base.
Well, the one guy that was not spoken about today.
By Dave.
Yeah. Alec Bohm.
Yeah.
Name was never mentioned.
Yeah.
We know that there was a lot of chatter last offseason about the Phillies looking to move Bohm. They obviously didn't. Jason Stark at The Athletic wrote in a story just last week that the Dombrowski tried harder than he let on to move Bohm. I got to think that with him, looking at about $10.5 million in arbitration, he's not going to be non-tendered, but the Phillies got to look at that and go, is that player worth $10.5 million?
I think there's a good chance he's played his last game.
Yeah, and I think that might be the situation, that he has to go elsewhere. And if that's the case, and now you've opened up third base, not to say that it would be for the start of the season, but maybe you're piecemealing it there with like a veteran that you bring in, or Sosa or whatever.
One of the big winners today was Otto Kemp.
Otto Kemp, yeah.
I mean, I know Otto Kemp's like third base is a natural position. I actually thought it was his worst defense. I think he looks pretty good in left field, did all right at first base, but Otto Kemp maybe, and you have Sosa as well, but
Yeah.
Otto Kemp maybe becomes like the early favorite there at third base if Bohm is not back, which I think both you and I believe probably won't be the case.
The best thing about the thing that makes you say that Otto Kemp was the big winner today is Dombrowski said, I believe that he's an everyday player, major league ball player. So there's a lot of thump in his bat. That's what Dave Dombrowski said. So there's a real belief that Otto Kemp could be a regular for this team. It's got to be to replace Alec Bohm. I can't imagine it being anyone else.
Or he's part of the solution in left field and kind of is a super utility. And I think that will probably end up being his long-term role. I think he is more of the play 3 times a week guy, but that's fine. You need those guys, and it's a guy that you didn't draft, but signed and developed, and that's a great sign. So there will be a ton of time to get into everything from today, but I feel like we did a good job here of scratching the surface, and if you want more, head over to onpattison.com, where Anthony, myself, and Grace Del Pizzo are going to have a ton of great stuff.
Absolutely, and once again, thanks to Wapner Newman, Philadelphia's personal injury attorneys, for sponsoring this edition of Phillies Stoplight, and I guess we'll do this again when there's news.
We'll do it again at some point.
At some point,
yeah,
we'll do it again. But thanks for being with us all season. We promise to give you the best Phillies coverage in Philadelphia throughout the winter and then into next spring for the 2026 Philadelphia Phillies.